everybody. I'm Maureen Lenker of Entertainment Weekly, and I am so excited to be here on publication day with both Jasmine Guillory and Emily Henry for their amazing new novels, Book Lovers and By the Book. Welcome, ladies.
Hello. So good to see you guys.
You too. And for those that didn't catch it in the chat, just a friendly reminder that you will receive your pre-ordered books. They will ship out after the event tonight. So it'll probably be about 8 to 10 business days before it turns up at your house or apartment or whatever your lovely abode is. But I have lots of questions for these two gals. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in and start by asking, as the titles may tell people, both of your books are set in the world of publishing and editors, agents, and authors. So what prompted that choice in each of your cases? Was it just write what you know? Emily, why don't you start?
It was definitely a little bit write what you know for me. I feel like it's always something I fall back on where I'll toy with other fields, other careers for characters. And I'm like, but I'd have to do so much research on that. And would it feel authentic and all of that? But I think also I specifically knew I wanted really career-oriented characters. And I wanted them to be doing something they were really passionate about and that required a lot of time. And frankly, that just is how publishing is. Like, editors take their work home, agents work really weird, wacky hours. And I just feel like it is the field that the work-life balance is just sort of totally nebulous and weird. So for me, it was like, I know that this is a field that requires so much passion and also so much time. And that worked for the needs of the characters I was building.
Yeah. Jasmine, what about you?
Well, By the Book is a reimagining of Beauty and the Beast, and it just seemed natural for Belle to be working in publishing. I mean, she has loved books. And when I was thinking of like who a, modern day Belle would be, in my case as Belle, of course she would like want to go into publishing, because I think a lot of people who love books sort of think about being a writer, working in publishing, and, maybe all of that at the same time. It definitely was a book that I could not have written before I was deep into this world. So there's a lot that, thank goodness it was my 7th book, because otherwise I wouldn't have known a lot of what I think needed to happen, to Isabella in her life and how her life worked. But it was definitely fun to kind of write in that world.
Yeah. And these are both love letters to books too, as well. Like, they really celebrate the escape of story, and both of you write about the way libraries and bookstores smell, which I love. So what do you find inherently romantic about books and the places that are dedicated to them? Jasmine, why don't you kick things off this time?
I think there's just there's so much history there, right? Because every bookstore, every library is different. It's personal. If it's like someone's library at home, it's one that they've built themselves. Each book they've either purchased or been given or, found somewhere. There's a story behind everything. And I think each library that you go in, I mean, if you think about it, like the libraries that you have spent time in your life, I can imagine them and think about each one and how old I was and where I was in my life during all of those times, all of my favorite bookstores that had meaning to me. And so I think that everyone, people who love books feel that way about places that are surrounded by books. And I think if you find someone else who has those same feelings, then it is a way that you really start to get to know each other by talking about books, talking about what you liked, what you didn't, how you've built your own library. And I think stuff like that, I mean, I've, made friendships and relationships my whole life that way. And so it was really fun to kind of get to write a book that is that way too.
Yeah. And Emily?
Yeah, that is such a great answer. And I don't know if I've even had this specific question, but Jasmine's answer was jogging so many things in my memory. And I think it's so true. If you're a person who loves story, you probably remember one of, if not your very first trip to the library. And I mean, I remember we went on a school field trip. I was probably in like first or second grade. And I remember being blown away to realize there wasn't a limit on how many books I could take out. And like, you know, at home, it was like you save up and it's like, we're not buying books. We're like, we were a library family, but I had never taken that trip myself. And so to get there and realize like, wait, like I can just take all of these for free home. I can like hoard them, read them like, you know, at night with a flashlight. That was just such a magical feeling as a kid of just like limitless possibility. And I think as a writer now, that's sort of like the feeling you're chasing. Like there's that meme about everybody like chasing that Scholastic book fair high. I think that's so true for readers. It's like that feeling of like looking around and being like, there are so many stories I can like get into. And yeah, I mean, it really does feel like a portal. And especially if you find your love of reading at a young age, that's like a formative core memory that will always have that coziness and magic to it.
Yeah. Jasmine, as you mentioned, your novel is part of the Disney Meant to Be series and is a modern retelling of Beauty and the Beast. So walk us through how you figured out how to put your own spin on that story.
Yeah, you know, before I started writing, I rewatched the movie, the animated movie. And then to sort of remember, I mean, obviously I've watched it a million times, but I hadn't watched it in years and I wanted to remember like all the kind of little details, names, places, that kind of stuff, and like made a bunch of notes. And then I didn't revisit it at all because I really wanted to sort of think about, pay attention to specifics of the story, but then also pay attention to the things that I wanted to make sure not to do, you know, like the beast in that movie imprisons Belle. I wanted to make a change there.
Not ideal.
And so little things like that I wanted to be able to turn on its head a little. But also I wanted to think about who Isabel was, and who Beau was. You know, he's the beast, he's stuck in this house. Why is he there? You know, what does he think is wrong with him? What is his like curse or not? And so there were a lot of thought, and I like wrote a lot of stuff in sort of thinking about it, and then really developed my feelings. I mean, I tend to like write a very messy first draft and sort of keep fixing it. And so my first draft was really me kind of figuring out who these characters were and why they would come together in this house and fall in love.
Yeah. And then Emily, your book is this really, it kind of feels like an inversion of a Hallmark movie, and that you have the girl who would be like the bad girlfriend in the Hallmark movie, the sort of big city girl, ice queen who has no work-life balance. But instead, she's the heroine and she is figuring out her own value, and that her love for the city is totally fine. She doesn't have to love a small town. So were you intentionally aiming to sort of turn that trope on its head?
Yes. And it's funny because I think the first draft and maybe second, maybe third, whatever, had mentions of Hallmark movies. And we were like, we need to pull back on like this Hallmark reference. So I don't think the book ever mentions Hallmark movies, but it really shows me that I have like found my people, that people keep being like, wait, is this about the villain of a Hallmark movie? Because that was the very first kernel of the whole book. As I was watching a bunch of those back to back, you can probably guess approximately what month it was. And I watched like 3 in a row that had either a big city boyfriend or a big city girlfriend who was just calling to like harangue the main character and be like, fire everyone, burn the building down, get back to New York City. And it wasn't just that I thought like, okay, it's like, I love those movies very much, so no shade against them, but it wasn't just thinking, okay, we see this story often enough that you start to wonder, do people think there's something innately wrong with loving the city? And like, you know, being on a treadmill all the time, whatever, I don't know. But it wasn't just that was part of it, but it was also the fact that I was like, why does this woman love her? Like, why is she this way about her job? And why does she care so much that her boyfriend won't just like fire everyone? Just like you would think that would be hard for just about anyone to do, but she's just sort of like, you need to toughen up and do your job, do what you were sent there to do. And so I really wanted to think like, we see this character enough that like people clearly think this is a type of person who exists. And, you know, maybe that's just assuming that they're all sociopaths, but I wanted to understand, like, why does she think he should just be doing his job? And, you know, why does she think like you can't be sent somewhere to do this thing and just walk away and wash your hands? And so I was just really excited to write a backstory that would kind of justify that character's thoughts and attitudes and explain like why she's that way. Because nobody's just gonna, you know, be the Miranda Priestley who walks off the elevator and hurls their purse at someone's face for no reason. Like that came from somewhere.
Yeah. Well, in both of these instances of inspiration, those come with a lot of references or beats that you may want to hit. So in both of your cases, how did you decide what you wanted to include or put a nod to and what you absolutely like did not want to have? Jasmine?
You know, I think I just sort of kept writing things and seeing if they worked. My writing process tends to be very messy at the beginning, and then I like polish it and fix it and shorten it as it goes along. My first drafts are always very long and then they sort of get shorter. And so there were lots of times in like early drafts where I sort of tried something out and see if this would work. And then it doesn't work for, does it work for this character? I'm not sure. And then, you know, I kept working at it. So it was really just about, because like, I wanted to have some of the sort of Beauty and the Beast magic in the book, but I also wanted it to work with who Isabel and Beau are as characters. And so once I really figured that out, things fell into place a lot more. And I kind of understood why they would say certain things, if they would say certain things. Like there are a few references that I got in there that like just felt completely natural because it was exactly what they would say in the moment. And so that part got really fun.
Yeah. And Emily?
Yeah. Well, first I just want to say, because I'm reading by the book right now and it's so fun and so good, but I love how immediately the first scene, you're like, oh my gosh, this is so Belle. And then the second scene is like, but it's not quite Belle. Like this is like a little bit more realistic Belle where things aren't just sunshine and roses all the time. And like, you know, you kind of have to deal with those growing pains of seeing the world realistically. Anyway, it's so good. So I just like loved, it did have that, like that immediate Beauty and the Beast magic with Isabel, like going through the city, seeing baguettes. So good. You all are in for a treat if you haven't read yet. For references, honestly, I just like packed it. I was like, okay, she has to wear impractical shoes because, you know, one of these movies never happens without someone wearing the wrong shoes. And, you know, she has to get dirt. Like, I mean, there's like a bucket list in mine where they're like, we're going to do everything that would happen in a small town romance novel. And so I really was just like, I am not pulling any punches with like the tropes and the cliches and all of that. Like, I just wanted to pack it. But I did know like from the very beginning that I was playing with that format and did not want it to feel like it was necessarily going to come to the conclusion that so many of these Hallmark movies do, where it's like, you need to change. You were the problem all along.
Yeah. And then for both of you, your plots feature New Yorkers, but the stories take place mostly in these sort of getaways. In the case of Book Lovers, it's a small town in North Carolina, and in By the Book, it's Santa Barbara, California. So what inspired each of these locations, and then what was the research process like, Emily?
Well, I mean, I knew it was going to be set in a small town, although there were going to be lots of like New York flashbacks and all of that. And I think I just wanted to do something. It's funny when you're like trying to remember and you're like, I know I wrote this book, but I think that I just knew I wanted like a summery atmosphere that felt very different from my first two books. And I thought, you know, kind of like a mountainous area would be good. And Asheville is like within driving distance of me. And I have a lot of friends there. And so I kind of just like liked the idea of just how it would look, but also that I knew I would have these fail safes for double checking research and not just getting it super wrong.
Unlike Dusty.
Yes, exactly. And I thought that was funny to write into because obviously you see that like in books where you're reading something that's set somewhere and you're like, wait, what? Like, why is it snowing there? It doesn't snow there. Or like, it would be horribly cold there in that month, whatever. So I kind of wanted to avoid that. But that little reference that I slipped in of an author getting it super wrong, I think was me trying to be like, in case I do get anything wrong. Like, I know it happens.
And Jasmine, why Santa Barbara?
What's funny is when I had first like sort of written up a proposal for this book and like a sketch of what the plot line would be, the plan was to have it be like in upstate New York. And so, because he had to obviously like live in like a kind of secluded house far away that she had to get to move in with him. And then when I was about to start writing, I was like, I'm from California. I can't write a book set in upstate New York. I don't know anything about that. Why do we make this in California? Yeah. Where in California will that be? Santa Barbara works. That was sort of my like, because I also start every book with like a note on my phone with like ideas and things that I jot down. And I think the first thing in the note on my phone for this book is like Santa Barbara ? And I had been there a few years before I started writing, and then like I wrote a draft, and then I went down to do kind of a research trip and like drove around the hills to like kind of figure out where the house would be and like make sure I'd gotten the views right, and all sorts of like little details about that. And of course I had a very, very helpful information from someone that both of you know, your agent Taylor, who lives in Santa Barbara now, who gave me a lot of good info. And I was like trying to figure out like where beaches and stuff. I mean, there's certain things that I kind of blended together, but I wanted to, like make sure some of those details that I got right. So, but that was a very fun research trip.
I kind of feel like you like shipping yourself off to upstate New York to like do research though would have then turned into like the book inside the book.
Absolutely.
New moment, like gets really into like canning fruit.
But I am very glad that I ended up making California because it's much easier. I mean, because I wrote this book during the pandemic. I went to Santa Barbara to do the research trip like last summer. And so it was much easier to get there for me than it would have been.
Cross country, like on a motorcycle for some reason.
Yeah.
Well, my sister used to live in Santa Barbara, and I felt like you got it completely right. So
thank you. I appreciate that. It's a beautiful place. It was very fun to visit.
So pretty.
It's a great wedding.
Well, this may be a bit inside baseball, but I wanted to ask, in both of your cases, you really touched on the work-life balance issues in publishing, the bad pay, all of that kind of thing. And I think we all who are inside publishing have seen that with a lot of editors and agents leaving their jobs to go do other things. So was that something you really wanted to point out to people or sort of open people's eyes to, like, hey, you love books, but this is the reality of what's happening?
I think it just, I mean, I can't speak for Emily here, but I think it's just over the past few years, I've seen so much of it. And so when I was writing a book that was set in the publishing world, I felt like it had to include all of that because it wouldn't have felt real otherwise. It wouldn't have made sense.
Yeah. And I think, it's clear that we as viewers and readers really love seeing things and reading things in the publishing world, but it is interesting because I feel like a lot of the media about the publishing world is specifically made to make it look really like glossy and really glamorous and luxurious and all of that. And that's partly, I think a lot of the people making that stuff know that's not accurate, but they're like, people want this. Like, this is escapism. We'll give them like the glossy version of publishing. But yeah, same as Jasmine, like as I'm writing, I'm like, I can't just pretend that these people are wealthy, like they are scraping by. And, in a way, I feel like that was fun to bring in because I feel like Nora's character looking like that glossy, like hot shot. Like you have to understand that's like a look, that's a thing she's presenting, and it's not necessarily real. And that's just an added layer. But on top of that, yeah, like I said, I knew that I could put her character in publishing because I knew that that work-life balance was very flimsy. And it's a job where your reward is sort of like just the work. And not to make that sound magical, because like people should get paid a living wage. But in a way, it's like, you know, that people who are in it, like they're not in it for the money. And I think a lot of people outside of the inside baseball of publishing don't realize that. Like they do think it's like the glossy, younger TV show, like version of publishing.
Yeah.
Jasmine, I understand you have some exciting news for us. By the Book is the second Disney Meant to Be novel, but you're able to tell us today what the next one will be.
I am. The next one is called Kiss the Girl. And it is a Little Mermaid reimagining by Zoraida Cordova, who is an incredible author, and I cannot wait to read it.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
That is amazing. I can't
And it comes next year.
Fantastic. And then Emily, I have to ask, is there a Disney film or fairy tale you would want to write a retelling of?
Oh my gosh, I have truly never thought of this. I mean, let me think about this for just a second. I don't know. I think the thing that I'm always like, do I try and put this out into the universe? I really want to be part of a team of people who reboots the 60s Bewitched.
Oh my God, put me on that team.
Yes, I would.
There.
Please. Like I want that to happen so badly. Like, and still set in the 60s, right, Jasmine? We're on the same. It's just like, it's just, yeah. Oh.
Because sadly, the Nora Ephron movie was terrible.
The outfits. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah.
Amazing.
Oh my gosh. That's like my before bed show that I watch. Like, the same thing happens in every single episode, but like you said, beautiful outfits, like cool interiors.
We would make the husband less annoying.
Yes, definitely.
Because like, why is he always so mad that his wife can do magic? That's cool.
Saving his butt constantly. And I kind of want justice for Gladys Kravitz, the neighbor, because she's really annoying, but she's right. And she's gaslit the entire show where her husband's like, Gladys, did you take your medicine today? And it's like she's seeing witchcraft.
Oh my gosh. And then because your books are both romance novels and they are about people who love novels and books, what is your sort of ultimate book related romantic gesture, either that's happened to you or that you would want to happen to you?
Oh my gosh. The like crickets and tumbleweeds. I'm like concerned because I feel like my husband is watching this and he probably has a very clear answer and I'm just like, nothing.
I think I am so sorry to do this, but I think mine is in By the Book.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. I love that.
We can't know anything about it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I know what it is because I just read it, but
I have not read it yet. I'm trying to think because now I'm only thinking of like rom-coms and it's like always just like a chase through the airport, which is like not that good.
I mean, I would want to be gifted a library, a la
Well, I mean, right.
Yeah, I think that is probably the answer, or even just the ladder for my existing bookcases. I would take
that too because I'm very short. I can't reach.
An ornate little step stool, like trees carved into it. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I have rapid fire questions for you, but I think we'll close out with that. And so for now, I'm going to switch over to some questions from the audience.
All righty.
And start by asking, for these two books in particular, do you have actors or actresses in mind that you would like to see if they were to be adapted or that you wrote with in mind?
So I never write with people in mind because I just like, in my mind, I know what they look like, but it's never actually like actors. But I would be delighted to see like whoever people would cast for both Isabel and Beau. I think that would be very, I always love seeing what like readers think about that, because so many of them have excellent ideas.
Yeah, if anyone who has started it, if you have thoughts, please put them in the chat.
Yes, put them in the chat.
Really side-eye them. Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't usually write, like, I actually don't feel like I can see my characters' faces. I'm like, I know they have these details, but beyond that, it's all very murky.
Okay, do you know what's, I'm sorry for interrupting you, Ellen, but do you know what's so funny is like on Instagram months ago, it was probably last year sometime, you said something about how you never see your characters' faces, but you know exactly where the refrigerator is. And that's what I was working on by the book. And I was like, I know exactly where it's refrigerator.
Yeah. Whole kitchen. I know the layout, and it's like, because that's the end goal. You're like,
I know exactly. I know everything about the kitchen.
Yeah, that is so weird. I love it. Like, I think so many people related to that too. They were like, yeah, I know where, like, and usually I'm not even mentioning the refrigerator, just that I know, like, it's not in the book. Yeah, I instantly know where the refrigerators are in both the apartment and the house that they're renting. In Book Lovers. Yeah, so I also don't have an answer. Charlie's like defining characteristic is that he has big eyebrows. So that's like the only thing is like, yeah, somebody said Brett Goldstein, which has been a popular choice. It was not intentional, but there are serious similarities there. So anyone with big eyebrows. And for Nora, I just love the idea of her actually being tall, because I think, you know, that's kind of an important part of the dynamic, is she's like a tall woman, and Charlie's like a little bit shorter than her. And I just like, I would love if that could be preserved.
Katrina Balfe.
I don't know who that is, but I'll Google it.
She plays Claire on Outlander.
Oh yeah, she's gorgeous.
She's very tall.
She's very tall, and you can sometimes tell, and I love that. I love that for them.
Okay, next question. How did you decide the names of your characters? And do you ever pick a name for one book and then regret it later while writing another?
So I have regretted like names of side characters in books because I wanted to use them for something. And I was like, oh no, I can't do that. When I'm picking main characters, I can't start a book until I have their names. So I like there was a lot of back and forth. I figured out Isabel pretty quickly, but figuring out Beau's name was much harder. I was going through a lot of like baby naming websites and like thinking of what would work for him before I kind of landed on that. But then a lot of side characters' names, I just sort of like grab quickly, and then sometimes they don't work by the end of the book, but then I know and I kind of change them. But yes, I spent a lot of time on baby naming sites.
Totally. Yeah, again, I'm just like, everything Jasmine says, I'm like, yes, that's the right way to do it. I'm very similar. Like, I named Nora after Nora Ephron and just immediately was like, okay, I'm done with that. I don't remember if Charlie had a different name before Charlie, but I definitely know that I didn't actually get to know that character at all until I had settled on a name. And it was interesting because I didn't even like particularly like feel like, yes, this is the right name, or I love that name. It was just like, okay, I'll try with Charlie. And it just worked for me. And same thing, like I'll do a lot of nameberry.com looking for side character names and main character names. And, you know, I'll look at specific lists. It'll be like cool guy name, nerdy girl names or whatever, and sort through and see. But at the end, like I'm the same as Jasmine in that like when you have the full list of names, sometimes you'll be like every single name ends in like a Y sound, or like they all start with S or whatever, and then everything gets changed anyway.
Okay. As successful authors, how much pressure do you feel while writing your next books, and what do you do to help alleviate that pressure?
So I don't really while I'm writing, but that is only because I sort of went through that and came out the other side. I think when I was working on my third book, The Wedding Party, that was the first book I wrote where I had books out in the world, like The Wedding Date and The Proposal. I wrote them both before I had any book out. And so when I was working on The Wedding Party, I was like, oh my God, people could read this. What if they don't like this character? What if they don't think, what if, you know, and eventually I just sort of like had to I was like, the only person you can please is yourself. Like, this is the only, you can't know what these imaginary other people are going to like or not like. All you can do is write a book that you like and try to make that happen. And so that's now just what I do. And I think that's a kind of thing that many authors have to go through, is sort of just to push through and figure out how they write after, once you know that someone's going to read something, then it's much scarier. But I just sort of like keep going, especially since I know like there's so many drafts that go in before anyone reads anything. I mean, I write a bunch of drafts before I send it to my editor, and then she gives me help, and then I go back and forth. And so that just helps that I'm not thinking of anybody else while I'm doing the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I promise I'm not just like cheating on my answers. I also, Book Lovers, is my third rom-com, and it's the first one that I wrote after Beach Read came out, because I wrote my second book before Beach Read came out. So it was a really similar thing. Even though I'd done, the YA books before, it still felt different. I felt like, okay, I have readers, and I was terrified to let people down. And it felt like such an arduous process compared to the first two, because also with the first two, I had time to really make the books shine before I showed them to anyone. And with Book Lovers, it was like, okay, here's a really bad first draft, like good luck to my editor. And yeah, I feel like I just had to fight for it like every step of the way. And it really just, the way that I think I got through it was just knowing like my editor and neither of us is going to send this out into the world if we don't think it's ready and good. But I did not feel good about this book until probably like a third or fourth draft. And I think also like the pandemic made everything complicated. Like I was trying to write a funny book, and I had just never felt less funny in my entire life, because I was just like, how am I funny? I'm like at home watching the same 3 TV shows every single night. Like my life is boring. I'm boring. My book is going to be boring, but it is so helpful to know there's always another draft until there's not. And Jasmine's exactly right. Like you cannot please everyone, and trying to do that is the way to surefire panic and misery. And so it really has to be just like getting your book to where you feel good about it, and just knowing that someone out there will agree with you.
And then somebody asks, can you describe your writing process? Do you start with character biographies, write at certain times of the day, etc.? Would just love to hear how you approach writing these books.
I'll make you start.
Okay, cool. I'll start. I don't care. I just never want to be like talking over anyone. I write basically first thing in the morning when I wake up, when I'm drafting, and I write every single day while I'm doing a first draft. After that, it gets spottier. But I don't really write anything down until I start writing the book. And what will happen is I will just have the idea for the premise, and I'll sit with that for like a couple of weeks. And then I know I'm ready to write when I have like 3 scenes in my head and a couple of just random jokes that I'm like, those work for those characters. That little piece of dialogue makes sense between these 2 characters with the setup. And then I really do just like sit down and start writing at the beginning of the book, and write a very, very bad, very long, often first draft, and then set it aside and then go back to it. And it's like, I'm rewriting almost every word of most of my books because my first drafts are atrociously bad.
So are mine. I always have an outline, but sometimes they're detailed, and sometimes they're like a handful of things, and then I just jump in. I always need to know kind of a beginning, a sort of like a scene, a few scenes in the middle, and then to know kind of what the end is before I start writing. And then I kind of write that down and see if like, what's missing there? Maybe is there stuff that I need to fill in before I start writing? And then I just kind of dive in and start writing. I also, when I'm working on a draft, write every single day. I tend to write at night. I have tried to force myself to write in the middle of the day, because when I was working full time, I am much more of a night person than a morning person. And so when I was working full time, like I would come work all day and come home from work and write at night. And then once I stopped working full time, I was still just writing at night. And so I've had to like kind of force myself on a different schedule to like write in the middle of the day as well. Now, usually if I'm like working really hard on something, I will sort of write in, sometime in the late morning and then usually again at night. But I keep writing every day on the draft until I have an end. And then it's just many, many rounds of revision. Because like often the first draft, I'm kind of figuring out who the characters are, what the story is, what's wrong with it, what's missing. And then I keep going back and kind of fixing it all.
Yeah. Since your books, you both have extended universes, I would say, but they are standalones technically. So this question is, would you ever go back and do like an additional or extended epilogue for any of your books?
I don't think so. I mean, I think I like, I never say never, but I think it's fun to be able to like toss characters in later on and see where they are in life and not make them the center of the story. But I don't think I would ever, I mean, maybe if I get inspired, but that's currently not something in the plans.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just did another like mini epilogue for Beach Read that you could get through my newsletter, and I'm going to put it probably up on my website at some point, but that like, I felt the same way. I felt like I'm done with those characters. I don't want to put them through any more like tumult. They've like earned their happy ending. Let them chill for a while. But then I had this idea for this epilogue and I wrote it and it was really nice. And I just didn't know, like, is this entirely just sort of like, I don't know, like it felt very superfluous, but it was really fun to do. And right now I don't have any ideas for anything else with any of my pre-existing characters, but I think it is that just like never say never. Like if I have an idea, I'll write it. I feel like there are people who want it. And so I want to be open to it. But I also, want to write the books that I have kind of like percolating in my head. So maybe.
Okay, next question is, what advice would you give for writers who are feeling defeated or having doubt?
I mean, look, join the club. I think all writers feel defeated and have doubt.
Yeah.
Often, all the time. I think for me, really, the only way out is through. One of the reasons that when I'm working on a draft, I write every day is because that is the only way to like help myself get past what may have been like a bad writing day the day before. Okay, I'll write today and it's better, or sometimes it's the opposite, but like but it teaches you that like every day is a new day. To keep working on something really does change things, does like make an impact. Like sometimes I have had a terrible writing day. I wrote something and I think like, that's totally wrong. Like that's not right for the characters. And the only way to fix it is to go back and like try again and see if it works. And if eventually it does, like sometimes it's the next day, sometimes it's days from them. But I think the only way to fix that doubt is to keep working on something. And also have like, my writer friends are my angels for all of that. Like our group texts are the most helpful thing when I talk about, things that I'm worried about or stressed about, and we can kind of cheer each other up and bounce ideas off of each other and all of that stuff. And I really suggest like finding your people and reaching out to them because they are the ones who sustain me.
Yeah. That doubt never, the feelings of being defeated and the doubt of the value of your own work, I feel like that never fully goes away. It's like you get maybe better at dismissing it immediately as like an unnecessary voice in your head, but it continues to be hard. And yeah, like having people that you can send drafts to and be like, does this suck? Do I suck? And have them like give you the confidence that you need is really, really helpful. But I don't know. I mean, it just is hard. Like, it is hard. You feel like you're like doing something that's so personal, but you need it to be like valued by other people. And I think like the really weird thing is, I think the book that I've had the most confidence in for my entire career was like my least popular and like least well-liked YA novel. Like, everybody's like, what is this book? It's so weird. It's garbage. It's boring. And I'm like, that book is great. I'm like, I don't know, maybe it's bad. And there are days that you just don't believe in yourself, and you do need to just like put your butt in the chair and write. And yeah, I don't know. Like, I think the thing is, like, sometimes you let that feeling of defeat or that feeling of fear keep you from finishing something. And that cements this negative self-belief that like you're not good and you can't do it, whatever. And so to me, that is the joy of a really bad first draft, is it's always easier to look at a bad first draft and see things that are wrong in that draft and be like, okay, this is a problem. How do I fix this problem? Because like a whole book is just this huge unwieldy thing that's hard to even wrap your mind around. But when you can see a draft and be like, this scene is weird, or these characters would never have this conversation, whatever, like that's so helpful. So finishing first drafts is something I always recommend to anybody who's like trying to make writing like a big part of their life. Like, finish a first draft, no matter how bad it is. Like, you will feel so good if you struggle to finish a first draft. Make yourself do it. Like, it feels like I can do anything for like 2 days, and then and you're like,
and also I think the hard thing, right, is that you are comparing your own first drafts to like published books that have been through like 10 drafts with like proofreaders and copy editors and all that stuff. And so like my first drafts are garbage. Like I remember it one time when I was like revising, going in a second draft through one book, I was like, wait, I wrote 2 separate scenes where they said, I love you for the first time. Okay, I guess I'll pick my favorite one, but like, it's just like, that happens all the time in first drafts, where sometimes I know I'm doing it. Sometimes I'm like, that didn't work, let's try this again. Sometimes I'm like, I forgot what I wrote 3 days ago, and I'm just writing. And so I like, that's the thing, like, you just have to keep pushing forward, and eventually you will finish something, and then you can go back and cut all those scenes and fix things, and like really figure out who these characters are and who the people are and what is good and what isn't. And then you can get like other people to read it and help you with it.
Yeah.
Jasmine, you might not know the answer to this, but someone has asked how many books total will be released in the Disney Meant to Be series.
I don't know. I know there's at least 4. The 2 that mine and Julie's, and then Zoraita's is coming next, and I know there's one after that. I don't know if that's it or not, but I'm not allowed to say anything about the one that comes after.
But it's surprise.
And then for both of you, which of your characters would you say is the most similar to yourself?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, the problem is all of my characters are me. Like, they're not all exactly like me, but they all have like something specific about me in them. Like, I remember I was doing an event for the proposal, and someone asked if like Carlos was a domineering older brother because like, I wanted to make a statement about like masculinity and whatever. And I was like, no, he is a dominating older brother because I'm a domineering older sister. And, like, that's where, and so like, there's bits of me in every single one of my characters.
I love that. It is so interesting because I feel like so much of writing, it really is like you're splintering your personality into like manageable bits, because in real life people are so complicated and contradictory and surprising, but when you're making a character, you need to make them kind of like, just more believable. It's like they need to be more believable than real life, and so you do find yourself taking like this one quirk or personality trait or like self-perceived flaw and being like, let me write a whole book about that. And I think, my first go-to answer was January, my first heroine. Like, she cries so much. And I think we even edited back like some of her crying because we're like, January cries too much. But at that time, I was like definitely just crying a lot and just like having a really hard time feeling any emotion without having that like physical reaction. And that's like kind of the very sensitive part of me, I feel like, is the part that spawned January. And then with my newest book, Nora, like people keep asking, like, do you relate to Nora or Charlie more? And I keep thinking like, well, they're basically the same person. Like they're very similar. And I don't think I'm like them, but then I was thinking about it more, and they both have the thing where like, as soon as something terrible happens, they instantly like kind of think it's funny. Like when it's happening to them, they're like, this really bad thing happened, but like in a way it's sort of funny that this bad thing happened. And that's like my go-to reaction. Like if something bad happens, I often do start laughing, because I'm just like, if it happens in a way that you're like, this is too like, how could the universe be so heavy-handed? Like write this plot twist that is like the most over the top thing. And I feel like that's like a jarring quality when you don't know someone really well, but I really love when I meet other people who are like that, who will immediately like joke about my bad things like with me, where they're like, remember when that thing happened? Because I just
a few years ago, my dad and my grandmother were both in the hospital, and like my grandmother had been in the hospital, my dad was in the emergency room, and they were about to admit him, and I asked like, what floor is he going to be on, and they said 7, and I started laughing, and the guy looked at me and I was like, my grandmother's on that floor. It's just he was like, why are you, but it seemed real funny to me at the time.
That is funny. Like the universe is like, Jasmine, guess what we've got for you?
Yeah.
We've already been dealing with this.
Yeah,
It's a fun little like spice that up. Yeah.
Okay, next question. Since we were talking about childhood library visits, what books or stories imprinted on you at an early age and influenced you as a writer?
I mean, there were a million. Starting with picture books like Eloise.
Oh yeah.
Huge fan, always loved her. All like so many of the like Anne of Green Gables books, loved those books. The ballet shoes, we've talked about this before, Maureen. I love like all of those books. I read a lot of books about like young British orphans.
Yes. The British are really good at those.
Yeah. So yeah, so there was a lot, like my parents were like, is there something that you want to so yeah, so I
glamorous, which is tragic, but nothing seemed more glamorous as a child than being a young British orphan.
Yeah.
I mean, as someone who had much redder hair growing up, I was obsessed with Annie, and I would tell my parents I want to be an orphan, like, because like the concept of what that meant did not like it did not connect in my brain.
I love that. Oh my gosh, that's so I think so. The two that come right to mind every time I think about this are A Wrinkle in Time by Madeline Riegel. Yeah, just like so weird and wonderful. And I think the character of Meg just called to so many readers, because Meg is like so average, and I think, and she kind of feels like some resentment, and she gets about that averageness, like, you know, compared to her younger brother, and I don't know, like, she's just she's so normal. And with that means like she's grumpy, she, you know, is jealous, she's kind, she's big-hearted. And yeah, I think that character paired with the world just being absolutely bonkers in the best way, like made such an impact. And then the other one I always think about is The Giver by Lois Lowry, which I read when I was like 8 or something. And I had my mind blown. And like reading that book, I was like, did not understand that books could like actually change a person until I read that book, and was like, wow, like little 8-year-old me, like this book changed me. Like I think about the world differently now. And that, you know, I think was like when I was like, I want to be a writer. I can barely read.
I love it. What has been a pandemic splurge or random purchase that has given you joy in the last couple of years?
Pandemic splurge.
Okay. I have a confession. I have spent a lot of money on candles.
What's your favorite kind?
I have started like I will notice my like the number of candles I own like decreasing, and I'm like, oh, I only have 4 candles. I need to order more candles. So yes, I think partly it's because like I was home so much, might as well make my home smell good. And then it got there, and then I was like, well, but I need different seasonal candles. It's springtime now. I need some spring candles. Yeah, it's all.
Well, especially with writing, if you're trying to write anything with any like seasonal edge of any kind, you like need an olfactory.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah,
but like
and
number one
for different times of day. You know, sometimes I need something for like to ease me into nighttime. I know.
I love that.
The number one like press swag item is candles, and I'm always happy to receive more.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, great. But Jasmine, people were asking like, what are some of your favorite candles?
Okay. Well, since you asked, Sydney Hale is one of my favorite candle companies. Bright black candles. They have really great ones, and they have like a sample pack that you can get, and so you can smell all of their different ones and then decide what you like. You know, there's the big splurge, a few big splurge candles, like there's the diptyque candles, which I'm sure I'm saying wrong, that I will like let myself splurge on occasionally. I think there's at least 4 or 5 other kinds, but I'll
My favorite thing is when you're talking about like the candles running low, that shows that you're actually burning the candles. And to me, it's like, yes, splurge on the candles. You just have to actually burn them. Cause I feel like for years I would buy candles and then they would just like sit accumulating dust. Cause I'm like, well, once I burn it, it's gone.
It's gone.
It's like sticker anxiety as a child. Like once I put this on something, it's on it forever.
Only before the sticker and after the sticker. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I did like a ton of just like I love home goods shopping. And I think being like trapped at home, especially, like I spent so much time rug shopping online that now, even though I no longer need any more rugs, I still like will every few days be like, I wonder what's going on in the rugs corner of the internet. And that is my passion, is buying rugs on the internet.
What is a romance novel you wish you could read again for the first time?
Oh my gosh. I've got one, but you know what? It's funny because I've actually, I'm not a huge rereader, and I've reread this book probably 3 times. So I don't know if I'd need it to be the first time, but Sherry Thomas's Luckiest Lady in London is a historical romance novel that is so good and so angsty and so sexy and so smart. And that was like the book that made me like a diehard historical romance reader. And I do think it would be fun to be like surprised by that again, to just be like, wow, this book is like, I mean, I love it. It's so good. It's also like the horniest book I've ever read, probably. And like, so I was just sort of like titillated reading it, being like, this is scandalous. And then being like, okay, I love this. This is amazing.
And Jasmine?
I really love, like, when I read The Unhoneymooners, I laughed so hard at certain scenes, which I'm sure you know exactly which I'm talking about if you read the book. And so, yes, having that, like, not knowing those scenes are coming again, that would be fun.
Yeah.
So we're getting close to the end of our time. So I'm going to switch back over from the audience questions to these last few rapid fire questions for you, which is, I will start with, inspired by both of your books, agent or editor?
Ooh, like, would we want to be one, or just like, which do we like more of, our agent?
No, would you want to be one or date one, I guess?
Oh. Agent.
Editor. Agent? That's fun.
Yeah.
I'm going with editor. So
would you rather live in Santa Barbara or Asheville?
if I could afford to live in Santa Barbara, I'd probably be living in Santa Barbara.
Yeah. I mean, if you're giving me Santa Barbara money, I'll take it and live in Santa Barbara.
Yeah, exactly. If that's part of the deal, then I'm there.
Would you rather read Beau's memoir from By the Book or Once in a Lifetime from Book Lovers?
Once in a Lifetime is too tragic, I think, for my reading taste. So I would go with Beau's memoir. And I also just love, I love a tell-all. I love gossip. Of course, I'm going to want to read his memoir.
I do love a tell-all. Yeah. There were a few memoirs I listed at the beginning of this book because they were real fun, juicy memoirs.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. I even love just like I'm going to be honest, I haven't even read most of the ones you listed or named in the book, but like I read every single listicle that came out the day after all of them published, where it's like 15 things we learned from Jessica Simpson's memoir. So
you've got to read Jessica Simpson's memoir.
I've heard
so
fantastic things.
Yeah, it's so good.
And then would you rather skinny dip or learn to surf?
Oh, I guess learn to surf, but I don't really like being bad at things.
I would skinny dip. I have very bad balance.
I fall all the time. But like I will definitely
naked surfing and combine.
Yeah, that sounds very painful.
Amazing. Well, that is all the time we have for today. Let's give a virtual round of applause to Emily and Jasmine for joining us today and congratulating them on their new releases.
Thank you so much. Emily, it was so great to talk to you.
Oh my gosh, yes, this was a joy and a pleasure. You guys are even better in, I was going to say real life, but whatever this is, you're even better in
this version of real life.
Yeah, in 2022, I want to say is version of real life. I don't even remember what year it was.
Yeah. I can never remember what year it is anymore, ever.
That's a good sign off.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Maureen. You were the best.
You're so welcome. Loved both the books. So y'all, if you haven't pre-ordered them already, get on it because they're both fantastic reads. Thank you so much for joining us and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Everyone. Bye.